Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. This is DV LeBron. Today, this show is sponsored by Midlothian Blade and Barber. Uh, these guys do old school haircuts, and they're in Midlothian. And just let Geraldo know that DV LeBron sent you for a great cut. I appreciate you supporting our sponsors. So, today, my special guest is Senator Birdwell, and while you don't see his picture, he is here. We had to do it due to the tech gremlins. We had to do it by audio. So, sir, thank you so much for coming on my show. I really appreciate it. Um, I I know that you noticed there's a lot of houses in all these counties that you represent in the
Yes,
22nd
sir.
district. So I wanted to go ahead and have you introduce yourself to the people of your Senate district.
Sure. Thank you, DV. My treat to be with you this evening.
Thank you, sir.
I am State Senator Birdwell. I've been serving in the state Senate now for about 12 years. Originally born in Tarrant County back in 1961. Grew up, most of my schooling years were in Beaumont, down in Southeast Texas. Graduated from Lamar down in Beaumont through the Army ROTC program. Was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. Spent 20 years in a career. Served in the Far East, the Middle East, in the First Gulf War, in Europe, Central America, throughout the United States in various places, and then retired in 2004. In 2001, was severely injured at the Pentagon because that's when my career culminated on Department of the Army staff. Had a 757 come through my window, and by the Lord's grace, I'm still here. My medical care took about 4 years to complete, and then in 2005, when my medical reconstruction was done from the events of September 11th, returned back to Texas. Mel and I bought the property here in Granbury in '05, built in '06, and moved in early '07. And, just great to be back in Texas. Been serving now since a special election in 2010, where I have the opportunity to serve the folks of Senate District 22. And right now, DV, just in case, particularly with the new folks and with redistricting having happened, I right now have all of Ellis County. But in January, after the elections in November, without being presumptuous, but presuming a victory in November, then Senator Bob Hall is going to serve about the eastern half of Ellis. I will serve the western half, so I'll have Waxahachie. It's not exactly Interstate 35E, but it's pretty close to that. So I'll have Waxahachie on the east side of that, and then most everything on the west, except down by there's some pieces west of 35E that I won't have. That about Novellis is who I get the opportunity to serve along with 11 other counties.
That is a big district to serve. Um, Thank you so much for your service, sir. As a Navy dog, I definitely I served with the Army during the Iraq War, and so
Yeah.
I appreciate you and respect you as an officer.
Thank you,
Um,
sir. Thank you for serving, DV. Hooah.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So there's a lot of things affecting Texas right now, and
Yeah.
there's so many issues. There's so many issues. So I just wanted to have you on to kind of talk to the people of Ellis County, because you're their senator. You're going to represent at least a good chunk of it. So I wanted you to
Mhm.
talk to them and about these problems. So one of the first things that I'll ask you is
Yeah.
about the freeze Mageddon. There's so many Stormageddon, the snowstorm. There's people who
Yeah.
died because of it. It was bad. I personally was more fortunate than others, but it was a bad time, and there was some stuff that was done. But now this the 88th session, I believe, is coming up,
Yes, sir. It's 88th. Yeah.
the 88th session. So I wanted to ask you, what things would you like to see this legislative session to address our power and our grid?
Well, unfortunately, the the answer to that question is a mix of federal authority with a lesser mix of state authority. The 87th session, DV, we did a number of things that changed some of the administrative structure of ERCOT and the administrative structure of PUC. And that has given us some efficiencies administratively that give us better, what's the word I'm looking for? Give us a better application and better oversight of our ERCOT grid instead of people that are outside of the state. In fact, during Ice-Mageddon, the chairman of the ERCOT board is in Minnesota. So you've got Texans managing Texas grid now. Same thing with PUC. There are some things related to hardening. In fact, in 2011, there was we didn't have as many people in Texas, but we had some rolling blackouts over in Navarro County and in Ellis because we had a plant offline doing service to get ready for the summer months. Because in the summer months, every power generation's on. There's no rest. So you have to do what we would call phase maintenance in the Army. You know, you can't run a truck. You've got to pull it off the road. And same thing with ships, you know, that y'all do.
Yep.
We had a significant freeze. We had units offline, needed heat, and you just can't flip one off and flip it on in a matter of minutes. So we had some rolling blackouts for about a 48-hour period. The legislature in 2013 said, we've got to do, you know, weatherization. Much of that weatherization had not happened. So when the Ice-Mageddon occurs in 2021, we're dealing with the side effects of the failure of much of that weatherization that was required to not happen. The challenge that we face going forward is with the current administration's hostility to natural gas, coal, and nuclear, the normal processes of the NEPA permitting, which is the environmental impact statements and the like, we've gotten some efficiencies with the grid we have. But you're absolutely correct that we need more hard power generation, thermal generation, gas, coal, nuclear. Gas is the best option of those right now because of the hostility to coal, though coal is a great option with the federal permitting of those plants. Fed's not going to give us anything related to coal. So the best thing the state can do is provide economic incentives for those things that say, if you come build, you know, we'll abate taxes for a period of time. But industry, I've talked with industry on a number of occasions related to getting the marketplace to put more power generation. Here's the challenge, DV, and I know I'm getting real granular here with you. And
no, that's fine. People want to hear this.
I hope you appreciate the granularity. So here's the challenge, because we want a free market. I'm using a lot of hand gestures, even though my face is not up on there. So because I'm looking at you, talking to you. So but if you recall back during the Ice-Mageddon, we had Warren Buffett about 2 weeks after Ice-Mageddon finished said, "Hey, I'll build you 10 power plants, or I'll build you 15 power plants, so you've always got excess power available." Great idea, but here's the problem with that great idea. The plant, if you build it, if you're not running it, because you don't need that power yet, meaning you only need excess power in the winter months and the summer months. It's kind of like if you go build a lake house on Lake Bardwell, but you're only living in it, 1 month out of the year, you don't get to pay the mortgage on it the 1 month out of the year. So if you build a bunch of plants that then are not contributing to energy being sold, but they're sitting in reserve capacity, you still have to pay the mortgage on that plant as part of the price structure for the unit of measure of whether it's cubic feet of gas, megawatts of electricity, whatever it may be. So any new to be operating at full tilt, you still have to pay for the construction of that plant. So the challenge in the marketplace that I've been talking to the producers is they want to build new energy plants, but need to have the ability to be able to charge the unit of measure to recoup the cost of building the plant, even if the plant is only running 4 months out of the year.
Okay.
Which means that the price point for what you're paying today in electricity goes up to have that surge. So as energy users go up, it's a marketplace that says we need a little bit more energy, we need a little bit more. So you have to gradually build as your population's going up. The challenge is is that the last gas-fired plant we built, DV, was 12 years ago.
Wow.
So we need more because the state of Texas has grown immensely in the last. So what's happened is if you use I mean, it'd be easier if I had if my picture was up, but back in 2011, we had, a wide amount of buffer. But as people have moved in, for every new Kroger and HEB and Walmart or whatever's been built that's plugged in, that reserve capacity has been shrinking. And so we're getting to that point where some of the power industry is going to try to build some plants, put things on the grid. To be able to get the return on investment, though, they've got to be able to build and then run that power station and get a return on investment that allows them to pay that mortgage off in about 15 years of a 40-year lifespan of a plant. The challenge with that is that the reason we have so much gas or so much wind and solar is because even in a negative marketplace, the federal government subsidies make them profitable. And that's why they build so much, is because they're paying off their mortgage of constructing wind and solar in 3 to 5 years. Whereas a gas-fired plant, they're paying their mortgage of construction for 15 years. And that's in a predictable price point for what they can charge for cubic foot of gas or a kilowatt hour of electricity.
Okay.
So those are the challenges so we love the growth in Texas. And part of the reason we have such growth in Texas is because of reliable, predictable price points for energy.
Right.
And the demand of that energy is going to require more power to be generated. So I wish I had a magic wand that could say, here's where I'm going to put this plant and this plant and this plant. But you don't want government owning those plants. You want private industry owning those plants, and they have to make a marketplace decision as to where and when to build. And so whether that's counties that may offer a 312 tax abatement that comes with incentivizing where they might build, for how many years, those types of things may occur. I know that there's not a lot of fans of economic incentives that deal with tax abatements.
Yeah,
because 313s are their own problem. Those have been corrupted. We made a number of significant changes to 312s back in the 86 session to make them more transparent to the public, so that there's a 30-day vetting period, so that the citizens get to weigh in on that if a 312 is done. But the growth in the state's going to demand more power, and we need a federal government that's friendly to that power generation, not hostile to it.
And they're definitely.
And that's our.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And that's one of the problems. I laid out the other ones as it relates to the energy companies have to be able to recoup the cost of building that plant, because if they're only running it for surge operations, you're spending a lot of money to put a plant up that's on. It's like that lake house. If it's not being used, do you not pay the mortgage on it? No, you've still got to make the mortgage payment on it. And that price has to go to the energy consumer for that plant to be in reserve and then potentially turned on.
It doesn't make sense.
And how many people want to pay that cost?
Not many. They're already
many.
The PCRF charge that has hit homeowners in all over the state, but definitely Ellis County has gotten a big piece of it. But other than some incentives for them to come and build, it's kind of one of those deals where supply and demand have to meet at a price point that's acceptable. So the other thing that's kind of, and there's like I said, there's a lot of issues that are going on. One of the things that pop up is school funding. The way that, and I talked to Senator Bob Hall about this, the way that schools are funded in Texas is way too complicated. I heard someone who's really good at this say that's maybe 6 people in the state understand how school funding works. Okay. And that is something that, it hurts our school districts. It's not good for, it's not good when the money is so, how the money is moving around is not so transparent. Because then you get the answer, it's complicated, and citizens don't really like that answer. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to say something too, is that because the school districts, and I'm using hand gestures here, and in fact, I actually have a dry erase board like Karl Rove. I have something I drew out a little bar chart on school finance, but unfortunately, because I'm using Safari, and you can't see me, but the state is intertwined with school districts for school funding. So some historical context is similar to the federal government prior to the Great Depression. The federal government wasn't involved with a number of things before the Great Depression. Prior to the Great Depression, school districts were overwhelmingly funded by local property taxes, and then the schools received supplemental income from the state based on what's called the Permanent School Fund, which is money that we collect from the royalties and sales of energy from state-owned properties. But when the Great Depression hits, schools still need to be funded, but the ability of local taxpayers to pay that is severely depleted. So similar to how the federal government said, okay, we're going to come in with, and I hate to say the word welfare state because I don't want to make it sound like state schools are a welfare state, but all the things that FDR did with the New Deal that put federal dollars into so many local things, the state had to do the same thing parallel to coming in and helping school districts. Once the state did that and the Great Depression is over with, what happened? We had created the expectation by school districts that the state's always going to show up with these dollars. And so you have now a school finance system that is funded first by local taxes, and then the state comes in and formulaically finishes filling up the bucket. So for those districts that are more property rich, the state doesn't put as much in because they're more self-funding. For the districts that are not property rich, the state puts more dollars in. So when property valuations go down, the state puts more money in. When property values go up,
right,
the state puts less dollars in. But that's based on a forecast from the comptroller. Now, there are three types of taxes, and I hope I'm not boring the hell out of you here, DV, because
I love it, but give the 30,000 foot view of it if you can.
I'm trying because
it's all right.
There are three types of taxes that go into your school funding. First is your state sales tax that is what we collect at the state level, and a chunk of that is the state's formulaic funding to school districts. We get we run on average about 80,000 new students, not new in the sense of they come in, but additional. So with those that graduate and those that come in, we always have we run about an average of about 80,000 more students than the previous year because of the growth in the state of Texas. Formulaically, we provide nearly $6,000 per student funded by a child in a seat to each of the respective school districts. There's 1,000 plus school districts in the state. The state puts in its formula, which goes to the maintenance and operation cost of the school district. Then the local property tax, there's a local M&O. So the state puts in to maintenance and operation. Locals put in property tax into M&O. And then locals put in a local, what's called INS, which stands for interest and sinking. So if Midlothian or Red Oak or pick any of the school districts in Ellis County said, we're going to build a performing arts center, we're going to build a new high school, we're going to build a football stadium, whatever it might, we're going to buy iPads. That's an interest and sinking cost that the state formulaically is not intertwined with local debt, because you're building new physical plant or making a real property purchase. The state doesn't play in that. We only play in formulaically funding how many students are in that school. Because otherwise, if the state played in the formulaic funding for interest and sinking, when the people in Allen voted, 10 years ago for that $60 million football stadium, DV LeBron's taxes, your sales taxes, would go to pay for a football stadium that they want up in Allen. So that's why the state doesn't play in the interest and sinking cost. So those are the three things that make up the total funding of school districts, other than fees for, like when you buy your ticket for a football game or things of that nature. That's local income, but that will go to M&O or local fees, booster clubs, things of that nature. So that's how it's funded. And the challenge is that I haven't run into a school district that tells me they need less money. Now, I have talked to superintendents that have said, if you give me more freedom of maneuver with the money you give me, then I can, they're happy with that. We've put more money in. We've also removed some of the penalties related to the small school district. The legislature, before I came into the legislature, had, I think it was back in 05, 07, put a penalty for the small school district as an incentive to try to consolidate. Let me give you a quick example, if I may, DV. Bosque County is southwest of Ellis. Meridian is the county seat, but Clifton, Meridian, beautiful county. It's got 7 school districts. The purpose of that small school district penalty was to try to get them to consolidate. But what are the taxpayers of Bosque County paying for? 7 superintendents, 7 different school districts. I've got like Cranfield's Gap is 1 building, K through 12, and about 180 students. Clifton is the biggest, followed by Meridian, and then you got Valley Mills, you got others. But so the school districts didn't consolidate, because the toughest political question in the state is who's going to make them consolidate, and nobody wants to make the school districts consolidate. Right. So we got rid of that. We got rid of that penalty. We've tried to fund. We put more money in to get the school districts to reduce their M&O cost, so that property taxes are written. That's why we went from a $25,000 homestead exemption to a $40,000. But at some point, I think what we're going to try to do, and it'll take us several years to do it, but eventually make all M&O a state responsibility, so that your only property tax is your INS for schools. Now, your counties and cities have the same thing. They still have M&O and INS, but the counties are not intertwined. The state puts dollars into funds for grant programs, but we are not formulaically tied to the geopolitical subdivisions that aren't school districts.
Right.
So you may get a grant this year, you may not. You might get a grant for this, you might not. But on school districts, there's that expectation. So I think that's where the property tax relief will either be that sort of long-term relief, and that's where I think we should go, DV, because when you do homestead exemption increases, well, that gives the homeowner immediate relief. It doesn't give the business owner that owns the, Brandenburger. They're on the square in the opening pictures of your video in Midlothian Square. It doesn't give the business owner any relief because it's not a homestead. So you've got to go to M&O relief, even though homestead relief is quicker. It's not as long lasting as it would be for taking the M&O and making that a state responsibility. But it will take us about a decade to do that, and a decade of strong surplus